9:15 on your Monday morning here at AM 1700, WRCR Haverstraw, WRCR.com. It's the morning show with Jeff and Will. Kevin filling in for Will, who was called out on an emergency. We hope all is well with him. And joining us now on the line, as she does every Monday at this time, it's Tina Traster. She's the editor and publisher and founder of RCBizJournal.com. That's the Rockland Business Journal's website. Good morning, Tina. How are you?
I am well. How is everybody on this blowy morning?
We're doing good, doing well. Doing
Good.
all sorts of things. How are you?
Yeah.
I am good. I have so much to cover today.
Excellent. So I won't interrupt at all, but I can't make you any promises.
No. Please. The discussion is always better than the monologue. So
Exactly.
no, discussion encouraged. Just wish I had some more time, but let me jump in. Lot going on in the development world in Rockland County. One of the largest projects ever, maybe behind the Palisades Mall, is picking up pace and is underway to be built, and that is the Watchtower Bible headquarters up in Ramapo off Sterling Mine Road. That passed a hurdle very recently, which we wrote about last week, and that is their environmental statement has been reviewed and accepted. And modified, but it is a large project, like I said, maybe one of the largest behind the Palisades Center, and that is on pace to happen. So people should take a read of that article and take a look at that project and just familiarize themselves with it. And speaking of other large projects, the Village of West Haverstraw is about to review a proposal for a 450,000 square foot distribution warehouse with 76 bays on a former construction debris landfill on 34 acres in the village. It's called the Grassy Point Bend Project. It is in an as of right in terms of zoning, but it does need certain zoning variances. Now, we're seeing this proliferation of warehouses, and a 450,000 square foot warehouse that's not off a major highway is pretty significant to project. But this warehouse proposal is also significant for another reason, and that is that it is literally next to where Howard Phillips, the chairman of Rockland Green and also the supervisor of Haverstraw, is negotiating with a warehouse owner to put a future animal shelter. The location, and we have written about this, is at 427 Beach Road. It's a 15,000 square foot newly built also warehouse that is on the market for $4.2 million, and right now Rockland Green is talking about is in negotiations to potentially buy that building. It sits exactly across a very narrow street, Ecology Lane, from this proposed 450,000 square foot what will probably become a distribution center, warehouse with truck traffic and 24/7 operations. So this issue arose last week. Last week, Rockland Green held its monthly meeting. And citizens who are concerned about the future animal shelter showed up at this meeting. You may have heard about this.
We did.
And the concerns are being raised in terms of what the plan is. But we have just published a story that says that Rockland Green is moving, sort of a horse before the cart, is moving forward, but really is not following its own guidelines on property acquisition. So, in a nutshell, Rockland Green is supposed to look at every town and county-owned property first for what's called an intermunicipal transfer. Because don't forget, the plan here is for the 5 towns. The supervisors are leading this effort to run a future shelter. So Rockland Green is supposed to exhaust all the possible municipally owned options, and then only if it's done that, and then it can find a suitable one, it's supposed to reach out to private property owners and commercial brokers and have an exhaustive look. The next thing that they're supposed to do is, once they do identify properties, they are supposed to do an assessment on many criteria regarding whether the property that they identify is suitable. And in addition to that, when they do target what they say is a suitable property, they're supposed to get two independent appraisals before they go ahead and start negotiating. Now, what's troublesome is that Mr. Phillips has said in public and in various forum that he's already, or that he's, I guess he and some group of people are already in negotiations with the owner of this property. And again, many steps have not been undertaken. There's been no documentation. There's been no resolutions passed by Rockland Green itself in recent months. They only just this past week passed a resolution to form a nonprofit, a wholly owned subsidiary, not nonprofit, wholly owned subsidiary to run the shelter. So that's really just the first step. So this is what's underway. Concerned citizens came to that meeting last week. They raised concerns about the site, environmental issues, accessibility in terms of being pretty far off of a major highway, its proximity to the Joint Regional Sewage Board, and also its proximity to this uncapped landfill. Which is on a DEC, toxic site, and will have to be, the toxins will have to be capped. So, and then, there's going to be basically built all the truck traffic will be very much in close proximity to where this proposed building for the shelter sits. There was some back and forth. There were some people from the animal sheltering world who pointed out some of the possible, limitations or problematic issues with a 15,000 square foot 20 warehouse, the 427 Beach Road warehouse, which has 25-foot ceilings, and then there's just finally, there's the issue of well, what really is this going to cost? There really is nothing on the table right now, but. Somebody pointed out that if they're negotiating for around $4.2 million just to buy the building, and you have to look at a shelter, and it has to be retrofitted in ways that are not typical of another sort of building. Where really is the price tag on this? There's so much that's unknown, and it just seems that the really problematic thing here is process, because if you go to my story, it's all laid out in terms of what Rockland Green is step by step supposed to be doing to acquire real property, and we can see that many steps have been skirted, and that the process is not in chronological order. So I think the citizens of Rockland might want to take a look at this. We put a link on to the, quote, guidelines for acquisition of real property by the authority. Everything is written there. We have only, taken that information and given it context in our story, but it's there for anybody to be looked at and read. And go ahead.
Oh yeah, real quick. I did have a question. Because I saw your article. It's very thorough and very well done. Good job. I want to know if you know of, is there anything that written in their bylaws, Rockland Green's bylaws, that says, in case of an emergency, we can skip from processes A, B, C, D, and E and go straight to F. Is there anything like that in their bylaws?
Well, I don't know if such a thing. I'm sure that in the case of any emergency, as we saw in the pandemic and Hurricane Sandy, when there's a true emergency.
Right, and that was the other part I was going to get to. What quantifies or qualifies with something as an emergency? I mean, someone might argue, maybe someone could agree or disagree, that, well, the Hightower's contract with the county expires at the end of December. We've got nothing yet, and we've got to get moving on this, so time is of the essence. So they could argue emergency that way. I guess. I don't know. That's up for debate.
I think, yeah, my understanding is that the acquisition of property would not fall under the auspices of an emergency. You know, and if this was defined as a true emergency in terms of the lack of funding for high tour, you know, then that issue rests with what to do in the current situation. Because even if they were to purchase this building for $4.2 million and have to go out to bids for all sorts of, you're talking about something that's 2 years away. So it can't. It's not going to be a stopgap for a lack of contract that is now. You know, there's a lack of a contract between. If there's a lack of a contract between now and the end of the year, by default, the towns are going to still very likely be bringing their at least obliged dogs. You know, the cats they're not obliged to bring, but they're going to be bringing their dogs to High Tour. It's the only game in town. The Hudson Valley Humane Society is not set up to take the volumes of animals that High Tour accepts. And so High Tour will continue to charge the towns for its services, or the towns will be, failing to live up to their mandate, which is to take care of stray and abandoned animals. And I think that would be a pretty messy situation. So High Tour will limp along for now. Even if they can't, negotiate properly, in the end of the day, High Tour has the shelter, and the towns need to bring their animals somewhere. So we'll have some messy situation, where somehow the county will have to intervene and continue to pay High Tour, through the towns, one way, by one way or another. High Tour will continue to limp along until or unless either it reinvents itself, this project gets off the ground and gets funded and gets built, or a third option arises whereby, another organization or group or philanthropists or what have you decide that we need a proper shelter in a good location with good management, and we find, a breath of fresh air and something better. Those are the three options right now. But I have to say that, there's a lot of uncertainty that's swirling around this Rockland Green project as it's going forward. I mean, to listen to Mr. Phillips on the radio and elsewhere, he seems he's on a real mission, and he has targeted this particular building for acquisition. But there's a whole bunch of steps that have not been undertaken. So I think the question is why, and I think if the community of Rockland County is concerned about this, they should be asking each of their supervisors, why this process is underway in the way that it is, because every supervisor sits on the board of Rockland Green, and every supervisor has a hand in this decision. And it's a decision that's going to impact our taxes. And it's going to impact our animals for generations and decades to come. It's a big issue, and I think it's gotten complicated too by the proximity to this proposed warehouse on a uncapped toxic landfill. So just very complicated. Issue. We need citizen engagement, which is why we do the reporting that we do, because these decisions have consequences and they matter.
I wish we had much more time to discuss this. Maybe we'll try and set up in the future some kind of show where we just discuss this and only this. Tina Traster, thank you so much for joining us as always. It's rcbizjournal.com. Check out the website, sign up for the newsletters, and if you feel like it, explore some more and see what they have to offer. Tina, thanks so much for joining us as always. We'll talk to you again next week.
Great week.
Have a good one. You too.